Hello and welcome to a stream of consciousness vlog that I'm calling Story Water. From the time I was a small child, I had heard the story of my birth many, many times. When my mom was in labor with me, we both ended up in distress. I was having decelerations, which means that my heart was beating too slowly, and my mom was having complications related to bleeding. We ended up in an emergency C-section in which my mom was put under general anesthesia. At some point, a nurse came out to my dad and asked, "If it comes down to it, who do you want us to save, your wife or your child?" My dad, without missing a beat, said, "Save them both." And so they did. Now, I know that this story has been and probably will be used as an argument for pro-life, which I think is completely inappropriate. It's emphatically not that kind of a story for two reasons. One, this was not a story about pregnancy complications that raised the option of abortion. The distress that my mom and I were going through were brought on by labor, by contractions. This is why my heart was beating slower and she was bleeding. The only solution to labor complications is to have a C-section or get the baby out. Ours was an emergency C-section, not a termination. And as a nurse, I know how important it is to talk to patients and families about all the risks of surgery, especially emergency surgery, and the biggest risk is the risk of death. So, however, the nurse talked to my dad about these things, what he heard was, "Who do you want us to save?" And he responded, "Save them both." This leads to the second reason this is not a relevant argument in the pro-life, pro-choice debate. Regardless of how any one individual describes their beliefs, the pro-life movement as a whole would not say, "Save them both." I'm not sure they would even ask, "Who do you want us to save?" Individuals may see this differently. My parents are devoutly Catholic and devoutly pro-life. They also are the type of people who see and respect life in all ages and at all stages, which is not too different from people who are pro-choice. Both want to see what is best for the person or the people involved and just come at it from different angles. But as a whole, the pro-life movement, the people who speak for it, who have the power over it, they are the ones who support policies and lobby for legislation that consistently sacrifices the mother to save the baby. So I don't think they would say, "Save them both." As I said before, it has nothing to do with abortion or the abortion debate, and I don't believe it should be used as an argument for any of the positions in that debate. Going back to the story, I often wonder about my dad's response. I find it to be an important reminder to avoid the kind of thinking that is two-dimensional and to look outside the box for more inclusive possibilities. But for the sake of argument, I have also wondered a lot about the choices he didn't make. Most of the time, my mom would follow up the story with, "If they had been able to ask me, I would have said save my child." At the time of my birth, my parents had been married for just over 13 years. Or they would say 160 months, because yes, they really did acknowledge their anniversary on the 2nd of every month, and they said happy X number of months. So, while they may not have discussed this type of situation specifically, there is no doubt in my mind that my dad knew what my mom would have said. They had spent 13 years praying together, raising children, arguing, supporting each other. If my dad had decided to honor my mom's wishes and said, "Save the baby," it would have been because he knew that that's what she would have said. On the other hand, as the child involved, I could not have faulted him if he had said, "Save my wife." In fact, as an adult, I can say that's what I would have chosen had I the capacity and knowledge at that time that I have now. I love my family, and I can't imagine the pain it would have caused to lose my mother. The loss of my mom would have been a million times more devastating than the loss of myself as an infant. It would have meant my dad becoming a single parent to 8 children, ranging in age from 0 to 14. And while we have a large and loving extended family who would bend over backward to help in any way they could, even their support could not have made up for the trauma of losing my mom. I would have wanted him to choose my mom over me. I would have wanted it for his sake. I would have wanted it for my older brothers and sisters' sake. They absolutely needed a mother more than they needed a newborn. But he didn't say either of those things. He said, "Save them both." He wanted and he wanted and loved both of us. And for him, we were both necessary. He chose not to make room for either to be set aside for the other. If one of us hadn't made it, it would not be because they neglected one for the other. My parents went on to have my younger brother 4 years after I was born and raised 9 children. And I am amazed every day when I think about that. And as I got older and had my own experiences, I would think about those words, "save them both." Because there's a certain kind of wisdom in that middle place. I'm not always particularly good at it, but every now and then, when I find myself sort of stumbling into that wisdom, I like to think that in part it was because of hearing this story so many times. I am so grateful that this story, and for my parents, reminding me to take a moment and to find the space to embrace all the possibilities. This has been Story Water. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll come back.